Okay, guys, so this is Django 101. This is an introduction to kind of how websites work with a server. And you can have your Mac, Windows, Linux, it doesn't actually matter, but when you pull up a browser, let's say Google Chrome, and you go to google.com, there's something that happens here. Now, you already know that, and it's true when you go to codingforentrepreneurs.com. We go to these URLs and we go and we get specific things. Every URL has something different. So here's a list, an example of URLs. This is something that we all know, we've seen many and many of times. So what exactly is a URL other than that it has a domain name in it and HTTP? That's pretty much what it is. It's Uniform Resource Locator is what it stands for. So it has a protocol. We're used to seeing HTTP, and then it has our domain name. HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. You don't have to remember that. Just remember that's pretty much the standard protocol for most website stuff. But overall, URLs are basically an address. When you go to that URL, you expect to find something there. Just like as if you went to an address, a street address in real life, you expect to find something at that street address. Even if you see barren land, there will be something there if it's a real address, right? So if it's a real address, it's an important point to note. Now, another protocol that you might know of is FTP. So FTP, colon slash slash some domain. That is another protocol, and that's another type of URL. So how URLs work is they use your computer to help you connect with some type of server. But understanding this a little bit deeper, servers are just like your computer. They hold files, and servers are really the place where most websites, that's the only place websites are held if they want to be in production, meaning if they want to have a URL that actually works. So going a little bit deeper, these files within that server make up a website. They do other things, but let's just, for argument's sake, they are what make up a website. They're files just like what's on your computer, right? They're those types of files. But they're not really just files. It's not just JPEGs or PDFs or any of that. It is mostly just data. So JPEGs or .jpg or .ai or .doc or .pdf, that's just a collection of data that's formed in a certain way that certain files can read and understand. Now, this website and this data, they go back and forth. They have like this type of relationship. If you click on a link, it will take you somewhere different, and then the way it does that is when you click on the link, it tells this data to send you back that something different, and then it goes back and forth, back and forth. Now, it doesn't always have to happen where it goes to the server. Sometimes it happens just within the browser, but just keep it in mind when you click on something, it often goes to the server and then brings it back to your browser and then goes in that little circle. So this is really the flow of data. So websites are the flow of data. It comes back and forth. We have a request and we have a response. So the request comes from the website, the response comes from the server. Now, Django manages this flow of data. It manages this. When you click on a link, it goes into this data. Django's right here in the middle. It's saying what to get and what to bring back. Now, this is kind of a better representation of what's going on. You see your web browser, you see a website, you click on something, it finds Django, and then Django sends something back. So a better picture of it would be a little bit more like this, because Django's actually on the server. It's not in your browser like some languages, like JavaScript is in your browser, which we'll discuss some other time, but it's not like that. It's actually on your server. So nobody can actually see your Django code unless they have access to your server. That's pretty much the only way they can, or you somehow give them access to their project files and stuff like that too. But basically, you need a person. That person clicks on something. It goes into the server. Django tells it what files to find, and this is kind of what your files will actually look like. It won't look like this. It's going to look more like this when you go on your server and when you see it. But anyway, so you have a person. They click on something. It goes and finds Django, and then Django finds all the files or the data related to it, and then sends it back to the website so the person can see it and interact with it again. This happens all the time. And You guys might be really familiar with this, but it's good because it's kind of a process that you go through. So now, what is it when you click on these things? When you do that, it's a type of request. So sending a request does all different things. So a URL is a certain type of request. Pressing play on a YouTube video is another type of request. Pressing a button is a different type of request. And sending a form is another one that sends data actually. Like these other ones don't actually send data. They send a request for something. This sends the data with the request. So going back to that first request of a URL, basically type in a URL, you press enter. What it does is your browser then looks for a DNS record. So Google Chrome or Safari or Firefox looks for a DNS record. DNS record typically is where you put it in where you buy your domain. So like name.com or GoDaddy.com or something like that. It's where you buy your domain, you put in a DNS record, and that record points to your web host. Your web host is where that server is. Remember, we have files for our website that make up our website, and that is in your server. Now, your server could be at home or it could be with the web host, which is what I highly recommend that you do unless you really know what you're doing on a server. So they handle these servers for you. These servers display that data and that information so your browser can understand it. Now, you go to a URL, it looks for the DNS records, goes to the server points it to something called Apache. You don't have to know much about it, but we basically set Apache one time, and then that points it to your Django project. So simplified, it's actually just like this. You just have your domain and it goes to your server, and it's like instantaneous. It's super fast, and that's because it's just small strings of text. It's not a whole lot of information that's happening, and it goes through, and it's really cool. But really understanding a little bit further, the person clicks on something, does actions, sends a request to the server. Django handles that request and sends a response back, and then that's the circle. That's how it happens. Now, Django has a ton of code, or basically written instructions on how to handle those requests. Each one of these levels is an instruction. DNS records is an instruction saying, hey browser, go to this server. This server then says, hey Apache, what Django project should we use? Oh, let's use this one. Okay, cool. That's what we're going to do. And then it's going to send that back to there. And again, this happens all super fast, so you don't actually really have to think about it. But to be fair, Django is not the only one that does these types of things. HTML and CSS, you can have just blank basic HTML and CSS to handle this request and response. That's okay. That will have to also be on a server though. You can do Django, you can do Ruby on Rails, PHP, Flask, Node.js. There's all these types of things, but I found that Django is the easiest one for non-technicals like us to learn how to do it. To actually put these things online and have user accounts and have this actually converted into something that we can actually use. Now, someone's name and email is a very, 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 very valuable resource. In many cases, it's more valuable than the order itself, because of if somebody is willing to give you their name and email, that is like saying, hey, I'm accepting you into my world. Now, understanding how we can use that data is why we want to use Django. Now, in this next video, we're going to kind of discuss how these requests are handled through the Django project. So what happens in here? What does that do? Once a URL is sent, what happens with that URL, and how does Django handle it? Let me know if you have any questions on this one. Otherwise, we will see you in the next one.